The progress of the last 250 years has been explosive. Year after year, the world and its people have grown more connected and more prosperous. It seems unimaginable. And yet, a man who lived in a world of sailing ships and horse-drawn carriages, of great wealth and great poverty, imagined our very world. He set pen to paper and recorded the ideas that would revolutionize the world's marketplaces. Free markets and global trade have created more prosperity and for more people in the past 200 years than was created in the previous 2,000 years. We are living longer and more comfortably than the vast majority of people who ever lived. But in today's seemingly ruthless competitive environment, where the stakes are high and winning is the name of the game, can an ethical and an honest business still prosper? Has the global economic system become so big and complex that morality and human empathy are no longer relevant? Where insiders and the rich get richer, and the middle class and the poor get poorer, and the free market is no longer free? I'm Johan Norberg, a writer and an analyst born and raised in Sweden, and these issues are of great concern to me. Therefore, I'll take a new look at the ideas of the man many consider to be the father of the modern world. He was a Scotsman named Adam Smith, a moral philosopher, a bold voice of the Scottish Enlightenment, and the world's first economist. He recorded his revolutionary ideas in two remarkable books, The Theory of Moral Sentiments and The Wealth of Nations. Those ideas changed the world, and in the next hour we'll explore how they continue to power our world today.
Funding for this program has been provided by John Templeton Foundation and Templeton Religion Trust.
The Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller is one of the largest ships in the world. It is also one of the most modern cargo carriers on the oceans today, carrying Adam Smith's ideas on world trade to a level imagined by only one man.
By opening a more extensive market for the produce of their labour, it encourages them to improve productive powers and thereby to increase the real revenue and wealth of the society.
In command of the huge ship is Captain Jess Meinitz, a 25-year veteran of the sea lanes.
You see the vessels getting bigger and bigger. You have seen an increasing volume of cargo going from one part to another part. And I think that trend will continue.
The massive scope of international trade today would have been unimaginable even a few decades ago. But Adam Smith foresaw the workings of such a world more than 200 years ago. He wrote that free markets and free trade would connect the continents and result in global prosperity. Today's markets have grown to global proportions, and revenue and wealth have soared. Just one way that Adam Smith's ideas continue to change the world. Captain Meinitz and his crew are on a journey that will take them over 12,000 nautical miles, from Shanghai to 3 more stops in mainland China, Hong Kong, and then through the Suez Canal. Now, after 20 days at sea, they are nearing Algeciras, Spain. Then it will be on to Rotterdam and other European ports. The economic facts of life in the cargo business mean that bigger is better. Size is everything. The Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller is over 20 stories high and 1,300 feet long. This ocean-going behemoth carries 18,000 containers. If they were loaded aboard a train, the train would be 68 miles long. The containers hold everything from fruits and vegetables to furniture and electronics, from appliances and kitchenware to vehicles and auto parts, a vast variety of consumer and industrial goods to feed the growing demand of a globalized world.
In China, for example, you have 1.2, 1.3 billion people, and the middle class is growing. And of course, there will be consumers like in the US and like in Europe. And of course, that will create even more a demand for goods to be transported around the world.
It's early evening when the ship arrives in Algeciras, Spain. Now, working through the night, over 2,500 containers will be offloaded within 10 hours. Then, once again, the ship will be on its way. Every day of the year, thousands of container ships enter hundreds of ports around the world. Adam Smith would be amazed. Every corner of the earth is now linked to every other. Each day, more people become connected by global trade. Each day, because of it, life gets better for millions of people. So who was this man who predicted that trade would lead to prosperity? Who foresaw this global progression out of poverty?
Smith took ideas of economics that were really in the bow and arrow stage and made them into a modern theory, which actually still drives our economic thinking today. People call him an economist. He was really a social psychologist. He wrote about ethics, he wrote about law, he wrote about politics, and obviously wrote about economics.
The man many consider most responsible for today's prosperity. Indeed, the father of modern economics. First made a name for himself as a young man here in Edinburgh, Scotland. This historic city was then the centre of the Scottish Enlightenment, and Adam Smith was one of its brightest lights. He had written an amazing book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, and that had propelled him into popularity. He would go on to write another, which was equally popular and eventually better known, The Wealth of Nations. Together, these two books described a powerful system of guidelines linking morality and economics.
Adam Smith was one of the greatest minds of all time.
His great gift was observation, and his study of human nature as it appeared in different types of society at different periods of history is absolutely awesome.
Adam Smith was born in 1723 in the small seaside town of Kirkcaldy, Scotland, where he learned about morality and economics at the local merchants' market. He studied at Glasgow University, became its top administrator, and then a pillar of the unlikely intellectual revolution called the Scottish Enlightenment. He lived, lectured and socialized in Scotland's capital city of Edinburgh. He had eloquently argued the power of free markets and the division of labor to enable people of all strata of society to become more prosperous.
The institutions that Adam Smith recommended have proved empirically and historically now to correlate positively with all of these metrics of human well-being.
Smith was particularly concerned about the well-being of the least well-off and thought that markets, especially the type of commercial society he wished to defend, would be of immense benefit to precisely those people.
He was the man that gave us modern economics with concepts like gross national product and productivity and supply and demand and labor and capital and all of these things we just take for granted today.
Smith matters because he posed a question that every single government since has had to address. Should governments intervene in the management of economies? Should they leave it to market forces?
Could market forces, on their own, alleviate poverty? Smith actually believed that they could. He had lived to see that his revolutionary ideas worked, to see life for the average Scotsman actually improve, and most important for Smith, that the poor were beginning to do better. So, do Adam Smith's revolutionary ideas, now over 2 centuries old, apply to the poor in today's developing world, as they did in Europe and America in Smith's day? Do they still have the power to transform the world? One success story with a surprising Scottish connection is Hong Kong. For much of its past, Hong Kong had been one of the great trading cities on earth. Packed with thriving businesses large and small, Hong Kong had no natural resources and little agricultural land. Only a beautiful harbor and a population of remarkably industrious people. By the 1960s, the colony was crammed with millions of refugees fleeing the civil war in mainland China. Hong Kong was a city hobbled by poverty. There were water shortages and thousands of refugee families called the harbor home. But everything would change because of the vision of one determined man, Sir John James Cowperthwaite, Hong Kong's financial secretary from 1961 to 1971. He was also a Scotsman and very much a disciple of Adam Smith.
Sir John Cowperthwaite is one of the great unappreciated heroes of political economy. He implemented in Hong Kong an experiment. He applied his theory of what he called benign neglect. So he instituted in Hong Kong the system of Smithian political economy to see what would happen.
Cowperthwaite built a Hong Kong that had relatively little corruption, an efficient and independent judiciary, individual property rights and respect for the rule of law. He instituted an uncomplicated tax system with low rates on both individuals and business. The overall tax burden was half that of the United States at the time.
And he implemented the Smithian system of peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice. And look what happened.
Little else is requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice, all the rest being brought about by the natural course of things.
In Cowperthwaite's decade as financial secretary, real wages rose by 50%. Between 1960 and 2014, Hong Kong's GDP per capita adjusted for inflation increased more than 10 times.
And they turned what was effectively a rock in the 1950s to one of the most prosperous places on earth today.
Even now, under Chinese rule, Hong Kong remains one of the world's most important financial centers. It's proof that with the right policies in place, change can come quickly. And today, the people of Hong Kong, despite continued unrest and demands for a greater say in their future, have a higher income per capita than their old colonial masters in Britain. While Hong Kong, along with Japan and the other Asian tigers, was prospering, China was stagnating. 20 years of Soviet-style centralized planning and control had crippled the country.
After Mao died, both the Chinese leaders and the Chinese people recognized that socialism didn't work.
Ning Wang is professor of economics at the Ronald Coase Institute, an author with Ronald Coase of the book How China Became Capitalist.
They tried new ways to organize the economy, and what emerged spontaneous was something we here recognized as the market economy. And in China, it's called socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Socialism with Chinese characteristics translates to change from the ground up or spontaneous development. Add to this the power of a market economy, and you have two of Adam Smith's most essential concepts.
They gradually opened up the economy, allowed private sector to enter in one industry after another. And of course, once the private enterprises entered any sector, they quickly outperformed state enterprises.
The small market economy which leaders had allowed to even out the rough spots in centralized planning mushroomed. Today, China's private sector contributes 60 to 80% to the country's job growth and 60 to 70% of its GDP.
So that forced them to resort to their own tradition, seeking truth from facts. Be practical, be open-minded, not trapped by any pre-existing ideology.
It's estimated that in the last 3 decades, over 600 million people have risen out of poverty in China. That's an accomplishment unmatched anywhere, at any time on Earth. And today, thousands of young Chinese are joining a global movement to discover how to maximize their nation's potential. Tens of thousands of students from all over the world have come to America to study. Many of them are here at the University of Chicago, one of the world's foremost academic institutions. Xingxing Li is a PhD student at the University of Chicago Law School, and she's studying the effects of government regulation on the economy.
And I just wanted to come here and learn from the best of the best, and then return to China and help to spread the knowledge to Chinese students.
This may be the best place on earth to study the causes of wealth and poverty. Almost 30 professors, students, and alumni have won Nobel Prizes